So your relationship with Vince McMahon is the topic for tonight. Let's start at the beginning. When did you first meet Vince? What was the first meeting like, and what do you remember about it?
I think the first time I ever met Vince McMahon was at an NWA wrestling convention about maybe 1982, maybe 83. And it was the beginning of the end for wrestling promoters. I'm going to take these off so I can be more relaxed. But it was all the promoters from every territory were there, like everywhere. Anybody that was anybody in wrestling. And WWE, even though they were their own wrestling federation kind of thing, were always long-standing members of the NWA. And often the NWA champion would wrestle in Madison Square Garden against Bruno or whoever. So there was a connection there with every promotion. And I remember being at a table where they had a whole bunch of wrestling promoters. They're all fighting with each other. It was like a war getting ready to break out between different promoters. Like there was a guy named Ole Anderson who was the booker promoter for Atlanta or something like that, or Ohio or something. But I remember he got up and pointed his finger right at Vince McMahon and said something about Vince, if Vince kept crossing into his territory with his television, because all the cable televisions were starting to invade each other, were going into each other's markets. And he said something about, first thing he said is that anybody that's not a promoter and is not supposed to be in this room, because it was quite a room filled with people, and he said, you need to get the hell out of here right now. And I could tell like it's pretty serious. I remember I started to get up like I'm not supposed to be in here. My dad pulled me by my arm and pulled me back down. And my brother Bruce was there with me too. We both sat back down and like, yeah, we are, I guess, part of the promoters, which we were. But anyway, so there was some big problem between promoters, and they called out Vince McMahon for crossing into their territory. And that if they wanted a war, he said, if you want a war, we'll give you a war. We'll start going into your territories. And it got pretty heated. And I remember Vince McMahon folded up his book. He had a big book, and he had like 3 or 4 lawyers like from a Simpson cartoon kind of slammed their books, and they stood up. And I remember Vince just walked out like it was like a big row of suit and ties all walked out. And about a year later, the war happened in wrestling, where WWE took on NWA and AWA and started going into went national, went to everyone's markets, and television became national. And if anything, it was a necessary step, I think, to take. But that's the first time I ever met Vince McMahon.
And then before you became the Bret Hart that everybody knows, there was the brief idea of Cowboy Bret Hart. Was that Vince's idea, or was that something? And when you first got there, what were the initial interactions with Vince?
Well, it's funny because initially I had an opportunity when I was quite young. They had called. I was in 1981. I've been wrestling a year or 2 years maybe, and they called me up when I was happened to be in the States, and I had finished up wrestling in Atlanta, and I was on my way home, and I was stopped into Chicago to visit a friend of mine, and they gave me a call saying that Dynamite Kid had been held up at the border. He was up in Calgary working for my dad, but he was supposed to fly into Madison Square Garden to wrestle Tiger Mask in Madison Square Garden. Maybe it was Fujinami, one of those two, but I remember they called me up, and it's like, are you doing anything tomorrow? And it's like, they said, you want to wrestle in Madison Square Garden? And it's like, hell yeah, I'll wrestle in Madison Square. That was like a big dream for me. So they called me up and asked me to come to Madison Square Garden, and I was going to wrestle Fujinami, I think it was, now that I think about it. But for a World Junior Heavyweight Championship match, and it was going to be a big thing for me. And I remember nobody ever heard of me or knew much about me, and I remember I got pretty nervous about it. But I bought a bunch of new gear, and I had brand new cowboy boots or wrestling boots that I had never even worn yet that I was going to wear. So I was kind of like had all the new stuff, and I was like ready to. I got pretty excited about it, and I flew into New York and caught a taxi to a really lush, fancy hotel about 2 blocks from the Garden. And I remember I was so nervous and excited about it. And I did a press conference with a bunch of Japanese reporters. And I knew that this was going to really open the doors for me in Japan for Japanese wrestling, where it was pretty good money in those days for an American guy or a Canadian guy to go to Japan. So I got pretty excited, and I did all kinds of media where I had to be. I remember them telling me, "Be more mad. You got to be more heel." And I'm like making faces, and I'm trying to cut promos about what I'm going to break Fujinami's neck. Me, like all this stuff. It was kind of funny when you think about it. But anyway, then I went up and take a little nap, and they told me, "Take a lie down because you're going to wrestle. It's going to be a long match tonight." And so I got all excited about 5:30 and meet them in the lobby, and I caught the elevator down, and I was walking through the lobby, and the guys that brought me in happened to be the 2 Japanese wrestlers that trained me. They came up to me, and I could tell when they were walking up to me that something went wrong, and they came up to me and said, "You're off the card tonight. It's changed, and no match." And I was like, they said, "You can go up and hang around the dressing room and hang out with everybody." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." But I found out they said Vince McMahon Jr., not senior, but junior said, "Bret Hart, who's Bret Hart? Like, he's got no name. He hasn't got a big enough name to wrestle in Madison Square Garden." So they scratched my name off and they put some other that had nobody wrestled him instead. But I remember that was for me such a heartbreaker. I just went up to my room and that was the end of it. They gave me $500 and pat on the back and told me that thanks for coming in, and that was it. And I always promised myself, I said, I'm making a goal of mine that someday I'm going to wrestle and I'll have a big enough name to wrestle in Madison Square Garden, and all that would happen down the road.